Hello everyone, welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast. We're talking about UFC back at the Apex. I don't know the number. It's in the title if you really want to know. This is the Garcia versus Onama Apex card, and that is kind of depressing because, don't get me wrong, Steve Garcia, David Onama is a perfectly fun fight. It is solid on a prelim card, anywhere you want to put it. You could even put it first or second fight on a main card, and it'd be dope because it's probably going to be a fun banger of a fight. They're two guys who generally like to stand up. Onama doesn't have to, but Onama's way of finding the grappling is always, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this fight because we're going to break it down in full, but Onama's grappling comes in when his striking is utterly failed. And he needs it as a security blanket. So if we get to that, then we've already had some fun times. But this card is not very good. It lacks consequence, with the exception of the Waldo Cortes-Acosta versus Anti-Delija fight, which the only reason that one has consequences is because heavyweight is bad. But there's a lot of fights between two guys who probably shouldn't be in the UFC, and if they're going to be in the UFC, should be utilized for a highlight reel for a better fighter. I'm looking at Jeremiah Wells and Themba Gorimbo. I'm looking at Charles Radke and Daniel Frunza. I'm looking at Kevin Christian and Billy Elikana. I'm looking at Timothy Kwamba and Chan Ho Lee. I'm looking at Dante Johnson. He's a little more interesting. We'll get him in a second. But Cedricus Dumas. I'm looking at Montserrat Caneo Ruiz versus Elise Ardalan. I'm looking at Phil Rowe versus... I'm going to be a little bit kinder to the Rowe versus Go fight. And then Alan Carr versus Carnelossi. These are all fighters that maybe should be here. I would say Frunza does not belong in the UFC, period. But maybe belong here, but they absolutely should not be fighting other people who maybe belong here. Like, they should be there to build other people or to show off their improvements in the fights against people who belong, as opposed to fighting each other. So that's kind of the pattern, the problem of the card. Anyways, the usual anti-gambling rant here. As I talk about gambling, I will be giving you information you can use to place bets on this fight card. I will also be placing bets on this fight card. I will be talking about the gambling odds on this fight card. However, something that you should 100% remember and never forget: this sport is chaotic. This sport is nuts. It's part of why we love it, but it is also why you should not be throwing down money you cannot afford to lose on these fights. That's the end of it. Anyways, let's get on to the happy part, which is talking about the fights. Steve Garcia, David Onama, featherweight fight here. There's not a lot to talk about with Garcia. Garcia is a heavy-handed brawler. He is 6 feet tall at 145, which makes him huge. But Onama is 5'11", so he's also huge. And there's not a lot of good technique to Garcia's game. There's just a way of getting it done in a way that probably no one should ever try to replicate. Doesn't mean that it doesn't work. I'm just saying it works because Steve Garcia's awkward physical gifts. He's not especially fast. He's not especially clean as a technician. He is a pretty bad defensive wrestler, honestly. I had to go back and watch that Luis Pena fight of his, Violent Bob Ross, and that was painful. Anyways, so what does he bring to the table? He brings the power of the bonk, the clonk, the boink. He goes out there and he hits people and they go down and they die. And the only exception in his wins so far in the UFC is that really sort of corpse of Calvin Kattar fight from his last time out. Other than that, it's knocking out Kyle Nelson in the first round, knocking out Suwo Choi in the first round, knocking out Mel Costa in the second round, knocking out Shailin Nurumbeke in the second round, knocking out Chase Hooper in the first round, knocking out Charlie Ontiveros in a fight that, for two guys who at the time I said did not belong in the UFC, Garcia has proven me wrong, was actually really, really exciting in the second round. And the losses to Pena that I talked about, and a knockout loss of his own to Mahashate. So he's not in his own right unkillable. And we move on to Onama. Onama is a good athlete, even by UFC standards, a good athlete. He is big, like I said, 5'11" with a, what's the reach here? He has a 74-inch reach to Garcia's 75-inch reach. So roughly parity. Garcia does have a range advantage, but to be clear, I don't think Garcia is going to use that range advantage for anything particularly useful because that's historically not what he does. Onama, his problem is that he is listless. He has an idea of what he wants to be, but not the technicality to back it up. He wants to be this sort of neutralizing counter fighter, and it to date has not actually worked in a single fight. Or if it has, it's eluding me because it's against somebody who just doesn't really belong here. Like it didn't work against Giga Chikadze. He had to go to wrestling. It didn't work against Roberto Romero. He had to get into a firefight with him. It didn't work against Jonathan Pierce because you don't neutralize Jonathan Pierce. He's a wild man. It didn't work against Gabriel Santos. Maybe it did against Gabriel Benitez. I don't think I watched that fight. That's back in 2022. I skipped that one. It didn't work against Garrett Armfield. Obviously didn't work in his losses to Mason Jones and Nate Landwehr. He always ends up in the brawl, and he doesn't seem to really have much of a game plan that actually functions at the start of fights. That's the thing. Is like there is a version of this fight where David Onama goes, "Hey, Steve Garcia is not a good defensive wrestler. I happen to be a reasonably good offensive wrestler. I should go out there and put the wrestling on him and win that way. I should make this a ground fight where I have him on the ground. I've nullified his biggest asset, which is the power, and just do that." I don't trust him to do that because he never does that. He had Garrett Armfield in front of him, a guy who is smaller than him and really is only a boxer, realistically speaking. The rest of his game is very, very underdeveloped. And Onama had beaten him before on the ground, and he still had to lose boxing exchanges over and over again before he actually did wrestling things. So there is that. Essentially, what I'm saying is that while I predict that at some point Onama will get takedowns here, just kind of accidentally, it won't be the focal point of his game, and we are going to end up in a brawl, and that is the Garcia land. And that is where Onama... It's not that Onama is a bad brawler. Like I said, he won the brawl against Roberto Romero last time out, for example. But you're not... Like this is much closer to the Mason Jones and to the Nate Landwehr fights that he lost, because over the course of the brawl, he got tired. And therefore, I'm going to go with Garcia by knockout. If this were a 3-round fight, I probably would take Onama by decision, because I would trust his gas tank for 3 rounds. I would trust him to wrestle enough, and he is very, very tough. Like, he gets hurt a lot, but he recovers. And I would trust him to probably get like really bonked in round 1 or something, get dropped down, get in trouble, survive, and then kind of out wrestle Garcia for 2 rounds, / outland him, / some clean aspects of his striking. I don't trust that to go 5 rounds. So what I'm saying is I'm predicting that to happen, and then Garcia to finish him as the wrestling tires him out. So going with Garcia by TKO, he is the odds-on favorite at -135 to -138 by TKO, it should be said. +110 to +115 for Onama. Onama is a live dog. This is a fight that could go both ways. If Onama takes massive steps forward, not even massive steps forward, if he just has a game plan that is functional and that he's been drilling, he could win this fight. But I am going to go Garcia by TKO. Waldo Cortes-Acosta versus Ante Delija. I will put it on the table, cards on the table. I don't like Waldo Cortes-Acosta. And it's not for my normal reasons where I think he's bad or I think he's just a jackass. It's that when he showed up in the UFC, I honestly was expecting good things about him. He had this athletic background, which has been overblown, it turns out. But still, it was clear that he had a certain grace, a certain capability, a certain smoothness on the feet, a little bit of power, and actually a pretty solid chin, and yeah, and good cardio. Like, he was durable and had cardio, and he had a boxing game that could generally be very, very good in the UFC. The problem is that the development that I was hoping for, the improvements I was kind of counting on, they really haven't come about. I'm not saying that he is not a better fighter now than when he debuted, but it's not significantly better. The flaws that he has are still there. He's a little bit less prone to getting low kick now, but he is still prone to getting low kick. He's a little bit less prone to getting locked out at range, but he can still be locked out at range. He's a little bit less prone to getting very frustrated. Well, no, actually, this hasn't changed. He is still very, very easy to get frustrated. And that always gives me a very negative tint on his fights going in and causes me to pick against him when maybe I shouldn't. I'm just trying to let me look at his recent fights here. I want to say I might have picked Spivak against him, and I want to say that I might have picked Robelis to Spain foolishly against him. But yeah, to be honest though, I think I've largely picked his fights correctly. I thought Lucas Bresky posed a little threat. I thought Pavlovich would crush him a little bit. That didn't end up happening, but he did lose a decision. I picked him against Ryan Spahn. I picked him against Chase Sherman. I picked him against Jared Vanderah. I don't remember if I picked him to lose or win against Marco Rogerio de Lima. I picked him against Lucas Bresky. So yeah, there's actually, I guess in a nutshell, I've been bang on despite my my negativity, which maybe puts credence on the fact that I'm picking anti-Delija here. The reason I'm picking anti-Delija is, do not get me wrong, there is a version of this fight where Waldo Cortes-Acosta just does his thing. The quick, like, little combination, back off, get away, come back in, combination, get off, back away. There is that option because Delija is not particularly foot fast. He doesn't have particularly good footwork, and he is very, very open as he plods forward. However, he does repetitively plod forward. He does keep the pressure up. He does refuse to kind of let the exchanges be that short thing that Waldo Cortes-Acosta likes to do without taking ground, without pushing him basically exorbitantly towards the fence. And I trust very, very few UFC heavyweights to get off the fence when that happens. And Delija may not be particularly foot fast, but he is fast in the hands, and they are powerful, powerful hammers. If you think about it, Marcos Rogerio de Lima utilized some similar ideas. So I am going to go with Delija by TKO. He is the favorite at minus 130 to minus 140, plus 105 to plus 115. But again, I put it out there with the disclaimer that I generally have a aversion to picking Waldo Cortes-Acosta, and you should probably keep that in mind. But I will be betting on Delija. I don't think I'm going to be betting on Garcia. I just feel awkward picking on that. I guess I'll look at the prop for fight ends by TKO. Maybe that might be a bet I'll take a look at. Jeremiah Wells versus Themba Grimbo. Okay, so I don't want to be terribly dismissive of Themba Grimbo because he has a great story. He's been through absolute hell, and I wish him nothing but the best in his MMA endeavors and also just in life. I want this guy to have a good life going forward. But he is not a very good fighter, and he's coming to it very, very late. Like, he's a 34-year-old guy that we're kind of treating like a prospect that can maybe improve because The Rock likes him, I guess. And that's kind of about it. He is an okay offensive wrestler. He has a good gas tank. He scrambles from top fairly well, but not really from bottom. He doesn't really have a fundamental striking game at all. He's tall. He's 6'2", and at welterweight, that's about as tall as you're going to run into, although we're going to talk about Phil Rowe later. And he has a 77-inch reach. So there is a certain range aspect to him that can make other fighters feel uncomfortable. But the actual technique of his game, the snap of his punches, the power that he brings to the table, these are all pretty limited. So he is stuck trying to wrestle people over and over again to try to get wins, and he's not a potent finisher, and it kind of shows in his UFC run where, like, he did lose to AJ Fletcher, and he got absolutely pantsed by Vicente Luque. And otherwise, it's a finish on Pete Rodriguez, wins over Takeshi Sato by decision, which, by the way, you should not be beating Takeshi Sato by decision. He has a bad chin. And Ramiz Brahima, which does look a lot better now that Brahima's got on the roll he's on, and the old man Nico Price. So you might be thinking I'm paving up the Jeremiah Wells pick with that. I am not. Jeremiah Wells is on a 2-fight losing streak to Max Griffin and Carlston Harris. And before that, he went to a split decision with Matthew Semmelsberger, who we now know is kind of just done, and beat Court McGee, who is an old man, beat Blood Diamond, who is... well, he's Blood Diamond. That was a horrible, horrible experiment by the UFC. And he beat Warley Alves. The Warley Alves fight, legitimately kind of cool, unexpected. Didn't see that coming. Jeremiah Wells is a 5'9" welterweight. He has a decent reach because he has pretty long arms for his size. He's got a 74-inch reach while being 69 inches tall. Like, that's pretty big. But his game is very, very repetitive. It is blitz in to the clinch. If you get a takedown, so be it. If not, little dirty boxing, break away, rinse, lather, repeat. And that means that for all the flaws I saw in Garimbo's striking game, Wells has no range game. He doesn't even really have a mid-range game. And he's just going to bring the fight that Garimbo wants to him over and over and over again. And at 39 years old, and given his build, which is a big bowling ball, I don't trust his cardio. I don't trust him to fight from bottom well. And while his takedown defense is on paper really good, you realize that no one's even tried 2 takedowns against him. So there's that. It's also like outside of Court McGee, who he finished in the first round, there's no one that wrestles even on his repertoire. So I am going to take Garimbo to just out-wrestle him, pick up the decision win, and go from there. However, I don't know. Like, this is a pick that, like, very much could go wrong immediately. Because if Wells comes out and he's able to just manhandle Garimbo, crash into the clinch, do his thing, he's gonna win. Like, if Garimbo can't score takedowns from that clinch, then there's nothing else that functions to his game. And as much as Wells is, again, not good and very reliant on physical explosiveness, which at his age is something that's going to go away, he has something. He has something in the striking realm. He has something he can do at mid-range. He has something he can do in the clinch. And I don't really trust Garimbo. Any striking success Garimbo ever has is entirely reliant on the opposing fighter getting scared and ending up fighting him at range, or then doing something stupidly aggressive. And Wells will do the stupidly aggressive part, but it won't be with the panic that those guys had. So there is that. But I will take Garimbo. He is the favorite at minus 130 to minus 145 and plus 108 to plus 120 on Wells. Isaac Dalgarian versus Yadir Daval. This one I actually really, really like. It's not a very complicated fight because Dalgarian is not a very complicated fighter. Dalgarian is very one-minded. He does not strike. There's no range game to him. There's no mid-range boxing game to speak of. There's not even really a clinch striking game to speak of. He is going to smash into you, take you down, and that's where things start to work for him because he's got actually a pretty good top game. He's got a wrestler sort of submission game, which is more smush than slick transitions into submissions, but he'll take a neck if you give it to him, and his ground and pound is quite impressive. He lost to Christian Rodriguez, but obviously Christian Rodriguez in beating guys who want to just grapple him has kind of been a thing, and otherwise he's been crushing people who are admittedly not very good. He's been crushing kind of the bottom of 145. Brendan Marote, Francis Marshall, that kind of level. So there's not really a good win to him. However, Yadir Daval has kind of the same problem in that his big wins are Connor Matthews, who's never been in the UFC, and a pre-UFC win over Michael Aswell, which is pretty okay, but Michael Aswell is really just a volume fighter, so that if you hit hard and you have defense and you don't get tired, you kind of beat him. Like, there's no danger there to speak of. And otherwise, it's a lot of can crushing, which, is to be expected from a 9-0 fighter. So Daval is long-term, I think, the more interesting fighter. He's a little bit more well-rounded. He wants to be kind of a pressure counter sort of guy. And I think he's building something really good, but I think it also needs a lot of work. There's a lot of inequities in his pressure footwork, and there's just a lot of unprovenness. So I am going with Dalgarian. However, if Daval stuffs a couple of early takedowns or even just takes this fight late, I could see Dalgarian just falling apart and getting stopped. So I'm very interested in this fight, but I am going to have to ride with Dalgarian, who is probably more of a favorite than I'd be comfortable betting on at minus 250 to minus 280. So at plus 200 to plus 220, Daval is a good bet. There's value there, and by TKO would even be another option there as well, because I don't foresee Dalgarian losing a ton of decisions over time, although he did against Rodriguez, so it could go the distance as well. So there is a chance that this could be the Rodriguez fight all over again, but there's nothing that says Dulgarian can crush basically Delval. I'm not saying Delval is a can. I'm just saying that Dulgarian's one skill set, when it really kicks off, makes everyone basically look like a can. Charles Radke versus Daniel Frunze is the fight I'm looking forward to the least. That doesn't mean that it won't be fun. Somebody is getting knocked out. This is a battle of two glass cannons. The only difference is that, well, the two differences is, number one, Frunze is more glass than Radke is, and Radke is more cannon than Frunze is. I don't know why Frunze got signed to the UFC. It is a mystery to me, unless we're really trying to build the Romanian market / Italian market, because he trains out of Italy. I guess that's on the table, but there was nothing in his regional fights or his Contender Series fight that made me go, hey, you know what? Daniel Frunze actually has something. No. He has some base level combinations. He panics really easily when he gets hit. And yeah, Radke's going to hit him with a left hook. And at some point, that's going to knock him out. Radke is really just a left hook and homophobic slurs, but sometimes that's enough to get the job done. I've said it before, I don't like that Radke is in the UFC, and this is going to be true for Cedricus Dumas later. My reason is that they are terrible people, but more so, they are terrible people who are also not good fighters. So I like Radke was brought in basically to lose to Blood Diamond, and then he didn't, and now we have him, because Blood Diamond is really bad. Anyways, Frunze gets knocked out by Charles Radke, because the difference is that Radke's limitations have come into play against Mike Malott and Carlos Prates, and comparatively, Daniel Frunze was completely unmanned by getting hit by Reese McKee. That is not good at all. Anyways, Alan Nascimento versus Cody Durden in a flyweight fight. Oh, odds. Radke is a very bettable minus 164 and minus 185. Frunze plus 130 to plus 150. That should be wider. I will be betting on Charles Radke. Alan Nascimento versus Cody Durden in a flyweight fight, which was supposed to be Nascimento versus Rafael Estevan. I think the Cody Durden fight is actually more fun because Estevan is an absolute fun soak. So, improvement in that regard. I'm going to take Nascimento. Nascimento has some fundamental flaws. He is way too willing to fight off of his back. He's kind of like the flyweight Charles Oliveira, essentially. But he's not as dangerous as Charles Oliveira, especially in the transitional striking. But he's trying to be Charles Oliveira. He's dangerous in transitions, both with submissions and strikes. And Cody Durden cannot help but wrestle people. Like, it's his game. He is a wrestle boxer. You look up the textbook of wrestle boxer, you find Cody Durden. He's prone to getting submitted, and he's prone to getting hurt. And the only two fights where he doesn't go for takedowns was his fight with Tadger Ulanbekov, because Ulanbekov was wrestling him, and his nuking of JP Buys. That's it. And that fight just went to lack of a time to get to that point. Speaking of guys who didn't belong to the UFC, JP Buys, come on down. Anyways, Nascimento by sub is the pick, but there is also a much more boring version of this fight where Nascimento just gets stuck on bottom and gets outworked, because that can happen. Odds-wise, Nascimento is a minus 275 to minus 300 favorite, plus 210 to plus 240 on Durden. Probably going to stay away from that one as a bet. Kevin Christian versus Billy Alakana. Billy Alakana should not be minus 250 to minus 275. There, I said it. But I am picking him. Plus 200 to plus 220 on Christian. Christian is bad. He's 6'7", he's huge. And that has been the case of him winning. He's got some jiu-jitsu off of his back. He's got some striking, but it is slow, clunky, cumbersome, shouldn't really work against anyone of a UFC caliber. I'm not entirely certain that Alakana is UFC caliber, but he is somewhere in the ballpark of like the bottom of the 205. And he has a more functional striking game, more coordinated, more speed, more smoothness, more functionality, just period. And he's also not like a panic grappler, although he did get subbed by Bogdan Gushkov. That is not a great sign. But I think that Alakana will look at Kevin Christian and go, you are 6'7", you have an 80-inch reach. Yes, that's scary, but I can still beat that. And basically all the opponents that Kevin Christian has ever beaten are guys that have gone, oh my God, you're 6'7" and you have an 80-inch reach. I'm going to panic. I'm going to panic grapple. I'm going to just throw anything that I know out. And they're also like all pretty bad fighters to begin with, or at the very least, very unseasoned fighters. The guy he beat on Contender Series was 4-0. He had beat a 4-1 guy, a 4-2 guy, a guy with no record, a guy who's 0-0, a guy who's 3-1, two other 0-0s. The only really kind of like seasoned fighter he's ever fought is Daniel Trinidad, who is not good and is a guy who's lost to Adriano Martins back in 2009. Adriano Martins is a lightweight. Just gonna throw that out there. 3 losses to Adriano Martins, a lightweight. And he was fighting a 6'7" guy. There you go. Should not have been fighting at 205. Also, he was quite old. So, yeah, I'm going to have to see Kevin Christian beat somebody who actually knows what they're doing before I believe it's actually even a possibility. So, Elikana for the win. I'll say by decision because I don't think Elikana has a way of reliably finishing people. And Christian does seem to be not undurable. I've seen him get hit and he doesn't seem to like instantly fold. And like I said, his grappling is admittedly very tall man grappling, but it is competent enough that I don't see him just getting crushed on the ground. Anyways, Timothy Kwamba versus Chan Ho Lee. This one is a bit of a coin flip to me. Kwamba feels like the more promising fighter because, well, he's younger, 5 years younger for one thing. Has the baseline physical attributes, but not the technical attributes. And Chan Ho Lee is kind of the opposite, where I like a lot of the technical stuff he has. He's got some cool wrestling stuff. He's got some good timing with his boxing. He stings well when he gets the timing right as well on the counter. But I don't think he's a UFC level bantamweight athlete. I just think he's missing some physicality. And it's proven by the fact that in his UFC run as of so far, and his run through Road to the UFC, he has won by split decision against Lao Zhang, who is not a very good athlete, and had to go to the third round with, I'm going to give this name a shot, Derwimsky Zapasi? I don't know. This guy is not good. He's just crazy aggressive and has been on the road to the UFC a couple of times and keeps losing. So there you go. These are guys that he should have finished and he didn't, or at the very least beat very, very convincingly, and he didn't. He did finish one and went to decision with Lao Zhang. And he had all kinds of problems with Cortavius Romeus, who is a UFC caliber athlete, but has a completely nonsensical, non-functional game. So, could he beat Kwamba? Yeah, he's the better technical fighter, but I feel like Kwamba has more of a chance of actually belonging here. So I'm going to go with Kwamba by decision. But this is the classic thing that I'm talking about here, where this is just not a fight that should be happening in the UFC. I don't have a problem with either of these guys being in the UFC, but they should either be in fights where we're trying to figure out if they're any good, which means we need fighters that we know are a UFC quantity, or they should be being highlight reels for somebody. And while the highlight reel could happen, I mean, Kwamba does have a flying knee knockout, so there's nothing that says he couldn't do what he did to Roberto Romero to, for example, Chan Ho Lee, but he was also getting beat up by Romero. And Chan Ho Lee could, I guess, get a ground and pound stoppage or something, because he does have pretty good ground and pound when he can get on top. It's just I don't trust his physicality of his wrestling to actually provide that. So, odds-wise, I think Kwamba is the first underdog I'm taking. No, Kwamba is the favorite, minus 115 to minus 130, minus 103 to plus 110 on Chan Ho Lee. Makes sense. This is a fight that should not have a lot of daylight at all. Dante Johnson versus Cedricus Dumas. This is a late notice replacement fight. It was supposed to be Johnson versus Nick Klein. It is now Cedricus Dumas. Listen, this is a sadness hedge. I'm going to take Dumas. The thing with Johnson is Johnson looks exciting. He's got an exciting style. He likes to knock people out. And he's been fighting at heavyweight as a 5'8" guy, which, I find deeply amusing. Realistically, though, I think this guy is a welterweight. And Dumas is quite large, reasonably athletic for the weight class of 185. He is not good at anything, but he is a decent athlete with good size, and Johnson will probably have to come in really, really close to him, given that there is a 5-inch height and 5-inch reach differential between the two of them. So I just see Dumas tangling up in the clinch with him, putting him down, and kind of introducing Johnson to like actually being a fighter, because Johnson's career up until this point is against a guy who should not have been on Contender Series to begin with, in Darian Abbey, because Darian Abbey gets hurt really, really easily. He is a glass cannon and should not be in any serious bouts. And then guys like James Ford, who's 3-0, losing record Ryan Parker, losing record Jordan Seifer, losing record Deontre Butts, and losing record Gabriel Sayang. So, it's kind of a little bit like a Kevin Christian. Why do I keep wanting to say Christensen? Christian issue where I kind of actually need to see you beat someone who I know is a fighter. Now, it's better than Christian in the sense that I know Johnson hits hard. I know he's fast. You can eye test that. There's snap to the punches. There's explosiveness. There are the ingredients. But it's worked against very low-level competition. And I can't believe I'm saying this. Dumas is not that low level. Anyways, Dumas is also on my list of fighters I wish the UFC would just get rid of. The guy's on an ankle monitor half the time. The guy is actively committing additional crimes and also not hiding them very well at all. Again, not a good fighter, not a good person. Can we just get rid of him? Anyways, I'll be cheering for Johnson to knock him out, but I'll sadden his edge that I'm picking Dumas to win. Johnson is a prohibitive favorite from a betting standpoint at minus 350 to minus 400, plus 260 to plus 300 on Dumas. I will take the underdog. I will not bet on it. And we will roll on. Ketlin Vieira versus Norma Dumas. Had to think about this one a couple of times. Ketlin Vieira is the fighter that I saw a higher ceiling for when she showed up than Norma Dumas. The problem, though, is that she is a profoundly very negative fighter. She doesn't really force action on people. She doesn't really have engagement tools. She relies on the fact that she is a large lady for the division, 5'8", 68-inch reach, and that people will inevitably try to come to her. And that is how she generally wins. If you look at all of her wins, they have that feature to them. It is beating Macy Chiasson, who, despite being 5'11", has to basically crash the clinch. It is beating Penny Kianzad, who is a entertaining enough fighter and a fun fighter, but someone who has no physical dynamicism and is also smaller than her. So she also has to come to her and try to make the fight happen. And she won that fight as well. Holly Holm, who has the outside abilities to do things, but is in love with the clinch. And then Misha Tate, only a wrestler essentially. Sijara Eubanks, only a wrestler essentially. And if you look at the fights where people did not have to come to her to make things happen, Yana Santos and Irene Aldana, she lost those fights. Even the Raquel Pennington fight, at points, had Raquel Pennington just kind of picking up offense at range. And then, well, Kayla Harrison did crush her, but like, I'm not going to hold Kayla Harrison crushing you against you. That's Kayla Harrison. That's the nature of the beast. Norma Dumas has a similar style, essentially. She lets you come to her, and then she applies counter wrestling and striking in the pocket to make things happen. The difference is that I think Dumas is actually capable of just filling range with activity. She is capable of having, let me pull up UFC stats here. She's basically capable of actually landing a significant number of strikes. Like if you have a look at their performances and you look at their highs of activity, for Ketlin Vieira, it is insignificant strikes. Okay, she had 113 against Tate, but Tate came in a fight where the other fighter was not basically gift-wrapping her strikes over and over and over again. You're basically looking at Kat Zingano back in the day where she landed 41 strikes and won a split decision. It's like the only high ones are because of the opponent is essentially what I'm getting at. Whereas Dumas is actually capable of putting up 159 strikes against Irene Aldana. Granted, that's partially about Aldana as well. But also, outworking Chelsea Chandler, outworking Carol Hossa, outworking Danielle Wolf, outworking Aspen Ladd, outworking Felicia Spencer. She will fill the gap and actually, make things happen. They're not great things. They're not terribly exciting things, but there's something that leads to round-winning things, whereas Vieira does not really do that. So, Norma Dumont by decision, as we probably get a very dull fight, but it is what it is. Dumont is the minus 163 to minus 186 favorite, plus 130 to plus 150. Both of those are bettable lines. If you feel like Vieira is going to win, go ahead. If you feel like Dumont is going to win, that is a perfectly reasonable betting line to take. Going from that to a completely unreasonable betting line is the minus 375 to minus 420 favorite of Elise Ardelin versus plus 285 to plus 310 on Montserrat Caneo Ruiz. I will say this, I'm picking Ardelin to win just because Ruiz has only one game and it is clinching, and Ardelin is not very talented, but she is big, she is strong, she is actually a physical force at strawweight. Ruiz should be at atomweight. She is 5 feet tall, 61-inch reach, and she's not particularly powerful. So I am taking Ardelin to win. However, she's a fighter that I'm honestly surprised I've gotten to the point where I am picking her to win. Any fight. When she got signed, I assumed, honestly, that I would never pick this girl to win. And you've got her at a minus 400 level favorite. Why? It's a size pick at the end of the day. Ardelin does seem to enjoy fighting. She seems to be getting better, so there is that, I suppose. But she's taking the fight game seriously in her 30s for the first time ever, and that's just not gonna really go that far. Then we have Phil Rowe versus Soki Ko. I'm going with Ko. The people are going with Ko at minus 185 to minus 200, plus 150 to plus 165. He is a good clinch wrestler. He is a decently formed, smooth striker. And historically, he has been able to get the job done with those two tool sets. He has a very limited range, so he does have to kind of come inside. Why am I nervous about it? Is because Phil Rowe is 6'3" with an 80.5-inch reach. And the thing is that you just never know, because very few fighters have fought someone like a Phil Rowe. There is a 6'4" guy on the record of Ko, but it's a guy who has 2 pro fights and 1 amateur fight and never won. I think he won the amateur fight. I might be wrong on that, but never won a pro fight. So he's fighting someone who might make him just panic, might make him have problems, kind of like I was talking about with Kevin Christian, and might end up losing. Phil Rowe has done that because people like Angelosa have passed up probably an easy way to win and panicked and got bad. It's also, guys like Jason. Jason Witt is more just doomed for that. Same with Orion Koshi. But Nico Price took risks that he honestly didn't really need to. It can be done. I mean, Gabe Green worked him. Neil Magny worked him. Jake Matthews worked him. But I don't know. Those are all, except for Gabe Green, those are all more proven fighters than Ko. But I'll go with Ko because technically speaking, he is a better fighter because Rowe is not anyone's idea of a properly built fighter. He's just huge, he's athletic, and he does hit really hard. So Rowe by TKO or Ko by decision is probably the only 2 outcomes that we can really go with. And then a surprising underdog pick to the point where I actually want to quickly, hang on, I want to quickly check my odds here. No, I am correct. I am correct on those odds. Talita Alencar is a favorite at minus 225 to minus 245 against Ariane Carnelosi. Carnelosi coming back at plus 175 to plus 190. I'm going with Carnelosi, and it's just a size pick. Alencar is one of many women in the strawweight division who, if we had an atomweight division, I would be picking to win a lot of fights. She's just too small, and she's really just a grappler. Don't get me wrong, Carnelosi has all kinds of problems. She's not well developed technically anywhere. She's not a particularly smart fighter. And when she's at physical parity, see the Lupi Godinez fight, or anywhere near physical parity, honestly, Lupi Godinez and the DQ win that she has over Piera Rodriguez, where she was getting her butt kicked, it goes horribly wrong for her. But this is much more the Estela Nunez and the Leon fight, where she has the physical advantages to get the job done and will probably do so. She has decent cardio. She has a reasonably well-rounded skill set. She is a physical freak. Just look at the picture. This woman is a monster. Look at those biceps. I don't have a picture up on screen, but go look at the Tapology picture. Look at those biceps. Look at those shoulders. Oh my lord. Obvious power. Anyways, I'm going to go with Carnelossi. Like, Alencar is a better fighter. She is a really talented grappler. She is a really scrappy girl, too. But she is not this weight class, is what it boils down to. She is 35 years old, fighting women who are going to be bigger and more athletic than she is. And we saw her lose to Stephanie Luciano. And the only wins she's picking up are Ryan Dos Santos, who's another atomweight, essentially. Vanessa Demopoulos, who's another atomweight, essentially. And also one that has to grapple with people to actually have success. Yeah, it's hard to see me picking her against anyone that's just not really, really grappling deficient or somebody who is her own size. That's what it comes down to. Also, if I recall correctly, I'm going to quickly pull up the UFC stats on the fight. I'm pretty sure I thought she lost to Dos Santos. Let me see here. Yeah, I remember this fight. I had Dos Santos easily winning rounds 1 and 3. I gave Alencar the second, which was fine. But the two judges that scored it for Alencar, Ron McCarthy and Adelaide Bird, I think had it just wrong. And also, Adelaide Bird might be the worst judge of all time, and Ron McCarthy is on the crap list as well. It is a rare day when the judge of the three I trust the most is Sal D'Amato. We'll put it that way. And D'Amato, I thought, got the fight right. So yeah, she shouldn't even have that win. Anyways, Carnelossi via decision, probably because she has historically been a finisher, but her finishes do come with like a lot of ground effort. And if she's smart, she'll just keep striking and stuffing Alencar's takedowns. And I know I've just said something horrible by saying if a fighter is smart, and we know that usually isn't the case. But I will go with Carnelossi to just kind of brute the way to the victory here. And even if you are thinking Alencar should win, I would not be taking that minus 225, minus 245 line. That's just, it's a bad line. Anyways, those are the fights. There's not a lot I'm looking forward to in a big way. The main event will be fun. The fight between Isaac Dulgarian and Yadir Doval is probably my highlight of the night. Nascimento and Cody Durden should be some fun scrambles. And that's kind of about it. There is always somebody who's going to say, well, sometimes the worst cards on paper deliver. That is true. That can happen. There are some great fights in UFC history that, going into it, I did not have good expectations for. But I've also noticed that under the Maynard and Shelby stewardship of the fight cards, of the matchmaking, that has gotten rarer and rarer. Mostly because I honestly don't think that there's a lot of logic to their matchmaking model. Anyways, those are the fights. Hope you enjoyed. Check out the links down below. They're usually down below anyways, but wherever they are on the platform you're watching, check out my Discord server for the Fight Simulator as well as the Fight Masters Prediction League and my video game stuff and social media. And I'll see you later. Have a good Halloween.